straight through versus gap years. Realistically, I could probably make an entire additional presentation on top of this about the benefits and drawbacks, and how to strategize going straight through versus gap years. But we don't have enough time in this video, but I really want to make a point to touch on this. So let's just dive right into it. Taking a gap year is not the same thing as taking a year off. I want to, emphasize that to an immense extent, right now. There's so much stigma that I had when entering school as a pre-med, and pressure from family saying, oh, gap year is basically just because you burnt out too early and because you don't have enough effort to kind of finish the job and jump right into medical school. I heard, same story from a lot of other people, so much pressure from family to go straight through because it was interpreted as a break. Or, so many people who were telling themselves that they didn't feel like they were doing themselves a disservice by kind of just stopping school. I'm here to tell you right now, most people in medical school right now have taken at least one gap year, and during that gap year, it was by no means a year off, right? It was because they wanted more time to write their primary and secondary applications to basically make them more pristine. They had more time for doing interviews and doing school tours. They had more time for drafting, activity updates, letters of intent, filing for financial aid, anything travel related to medical school, gaining more life experience, more clinical, more research experience, etc. There are so many benefits to taking a gap year, more often than not being related to just being fatigued from school. I know when I graduated with my degree from undergrad, I was certainly not burnt out at all. However, I will absolutely tell you that if I decided to go straight through, my application would not be nearly as well put together as it was because when I took the gap year. And I'm sure the case is the same for many, many people. All right, so moving on to our next point. And again, I don't really want to, I want to clarify that I don't really want to hate on anyone who's going straight through. I'm not trying to discourage anyone from going straight through, but especially if you are really serious about going straight through, your class trajectory will be a lot more accelerated if you go straight through. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to take all of your MCAT prereqs, which I'm going to go, in the next slide, I'm going to go over which MCAT prereqs I took and which ones I didn't take for exam. So your MCAT prereqs will have to be completed at a much more accelerated pace than if you were taking one or more gap years, right? Because if you are going straight through, you're going to have to take the MCAT earlier, right? Generally, you're going to have to take the MCAT probably summer after your sophomore year or sometime in your junior year, which might not be ideal for many people. But the classes you take will be taken at a much more accelerated pace. For me personally, gaining that, more experience with school definitely allowed me to achieve a higher grade. More difficult classes certainly wouldn't have been as successful at, say, biochem or something if I took it sophomore year as opposed to junior year. Just gaining that increased life experience, gaining that, these increased, or I guess more in tune strategies on how to get the grades that I wanted to get, only possible by kind of maturing a little bit first. So some people are perfectly capable of doing that. My hat goes off to you. It wouldn't have worked for me, but it's certainly doable, right? And I also just want to touch on the point that there are certain tough realities of going straight through. And before you kind of into it, I really just want to present them to you. More often than not, going straight through will be probably more stressful than taking one or more gap years, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, the classes that you take will most likely be at an accelerated pace, be a lot more front-loaded generally. You want to make sure that you have all your hours in, whether that be shadowing, volunteering, working, or club hours, whatever it may be. You're going to kind of want to have those hours in before you apply. And again, you're going to be applying usually, or not usually, but definitely before those that are going with one or more gap years are applying. So after junior year concludes, you're going to want to have all your stuff put together so that you can actually start creating your medical school application. While on the other hand, those that are taking one or more gap years after their senior year will start writing their application, or several years after that will start writing their application. So it's much more front loaded. It's much more accelerated pace. I personally chose to take the time to do a gap year. Many others also have done that, have made the same choice, but it's certainly doable. If you're going for it, I believe in you. Trust your abilities. Make sure you're taking care of your mental health. Make sure you are, doing your due diligence and creating a schedule that doesn't overwhelm you too much. It's definitely doable, but it's also definitely not for everyone. So, as promised, the classes that I took before the MCAT, or MCAT prereqs, and I put prereqs in quotations because no one on the medical school admissions committees, or no MCAT administrator is going to check the classes that you took before the MCAT and say, no, you can't take the MCAT, or no, you can't apply to medical school because you didn't take these classes before the MCAT. The point of calling them prereqs is that these are generally classes that will help you the most when studying for the MCAT. Having these classes under your belt, having exposure to these topics will help you the most and pertain most to the topics asked about on the MCAT. So, without further ado, so what I took before the test. So Gen Chem I took first semester freshman year, like I mentioned earlier. Physics 1 I took second semester freshman year. Physics 2 and Biochem I took second semester junior year, right before starting to study for the MCAT. And I would recommend this for everyone. Take Biochem and maybe one other MCAT prereq right before starting to study for the MCAT, especially Biochem, because Biochem has so many high yield topics on it, especially for the biochem section of the test. And it's really important to have those things like amino acids just like really ingrained in your memory so you don't have to rememorize them. There's a lot of biological pathways that are taught to us in biochem as well. Those are really critical to kind of have in your mind before you forget them, and just generally a lot of high yield information. Biochem is the most important thing I want to point out here, that I took that second semester junior year right before starting to study for the MCAT. Physiology, I also took junior year. Orgo 1 and 2, I took throughout sophomore year. Cognitive psychology and neuroscience were kind of several classes that I just put into two categories. They were kind of sprinkled out throughout my first 3 years. I was biopsychology, cognition, and neuroscience was my major. So a lot of my classes kind of fell under the category of either cognitive psychology or neuroscience. Now, maybe more importantly to you all, classes that I didn't take, right? So genetics. I felt like my understanding of genetics from biochem and my understanding of genetics from intro bio, which I took in bio AP in high school, I thought it was sufficient for the genetics section. And I think it truly was. I was definitely satisfied with my knowledge on that. PChem. Now, this is a really big thing. I didn't even take PChem, I didn't take PChem at all throughout my entire undergraduate time. What I did is I took a General Chemistry 2 class the summer after I graduated, and that fulfilled my inorganic chemistry requirements for a lot of medical schools. So again, a lot of you may be dreading PChem. I know I certainly was. I found a loophole. So maybe you heard it here first. There are certainly loopholes around taking PChem. They're really just looking for inorganic chemistry credits, right? So if there's a General Chemistry 2 class that's available at a local community college, or maybe that's offered by your school, go ahead and take it. It worked out for me. Like I mentioned earlier, intro bio, I was confident in that information based off my experience with AP bio in high school. I didn't take an upper level bio until after the MCAT, and then developmental psych I also didn't take until after the MCAT. All right. So here we are. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this presentation. I'm sure you all have questions. In fact, I hope you all have questions. I hope something I mentioned either inspired you to ask more questions about something, or maybe even inspired you to pursue medicine. Like I mentioned a few times earlier, interact with this video in any way that you want to, either down in the comments section, take notes on this video, share it with others, whatever you want to do. And of course, I attach my LinkedIn right here. If anyone has questions, I check it very frequently. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, thank you all for sticking with me through this video. Hope to see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.